AITA for refusing to let my brother use my house for his business after he trashed my previous place. So a bit of background. I, 29F, have a brother, John, 32M, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. He's never been particularly responsible, and that's caused a lot of tension between us over the years. He has this go-with-the-flow attitude that has rubbed me the wrong way because, well, he doesn't seem to think about the consequences of his actions. I'm more of a planner, someone who takes pride in keeping things in order and making sure I meet my responsibilities. John, on the other hand, has this tendency to let things slide, and it's become a major issue in our relationship. A few years ago, John was renting an apartment in the city. It was a small place, but it was his own space, and at first, he seemed like he was taking care of it. Over time, though, things started to go downhill. He didn't pay his rent on time, had people over constantly without warning, and left things in disarray. The apartment eventually became pretty run down, and when the landlord gave him an ultimatum to either fix the issues or move out, John just packed up and left. There were broken windows, stains on the carpet, and general neglect. To make matters worse, he didn't even bother to clean the place before leaving. I had to help him move out, and I ended up dealing with most of the mess, cleaning up what I could, and making sure the landlord didn't sue him. Needless to say, I was pretty frustrated. Flash forward to a year later, John started a new business venture. He decided to go into graphic design and web development, which on paper seemed like a decent idea. The problem is, John doesn't exactly have a stable income or a solid business plan. He has a tendency to get really enthusiastic about things, but then loses interest just as quickly. He was freelancing at first, but it wasn't enough to support himself, so he decided to try something new, running his business from home. That's where my situation comes into play. A few months ago, I bought a house. I've been saving up for years, and I was finally in a place where I could afford to buy something that felt like mine. I found a cute little 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, and I was absolutely thrilled. I spent a lot of time decorating it, making it my own space. It's a big step for me, and I'm proud of what I've built. My brother, however, has a tendency to see my successes as opportunities for himself. A week ago, John came to me with a proposition. He asked if he could use one of the rooms in my house as an office for his business. He said that his current setup was too small and he was struggling to focus with the distractions in his apartment. He promised he wouldn't be a burden, that it would just be a quiet place for him to work, and that it would help him grow his business. Honestly, I was taken aback. He hadn't even asked to borrow anything before. He just assumed that I'd be willing to help him out. I know that he can be impulsive, and I didn't want to risk him messing up my new house, especially after what happened with the last place. I told him that I wasn't comfortable with it. I explained that I had worked hard to get my own space, and I didn't want to risk it being used for business purposes without thinking through the potential consequences. I also reminded him about how he'd treated his last apartment and how it ended up looking after he'd lived there. I didn't want to deal with that again, especially since my new house was a major investment for me. John got upset. He started accusing me of not being supportive and being selfish, saying that I was looking down on him because of his business struggles. He said he wasn't asking for much, just a room to work in. He argued that I had space to spare and that it would be a huge help to him. I told him that it wasn't about the space. It was about my peace of mind and the fact that he wasn't showing the kind of responsibility I expected. I didn't want to put my house at risk because of his uncertainty with his business. My family got involved after that. My mom and dad both called me, saying that I should just let John use the room. They said that it was a small request and that I should be more supportive of his business. My mom even said that I was being harsh and that I should be more understanding of how hard John had been trying to get his business off the ground. But I was firm in my decision. I didn't want to set a precedent of allowing him to take advantage of me, especially when his track record of responsibility wasn't great. After I refused, John started talking about how I had a perfect little life and how I didn't know what it was like to struggle. He implied that I thought I was better than him because I had a stable job and a nice house, while he was still figuring things out. That really stung, especially because I never saw myself as better than him. I just wanted to protect the things I'd worked hard for. I couldn't help but feel like he was trying to guilt-trip me into letting him use my house. Since then, things have been awkward between us. He hasn't really spoken to me much, and our parents have been trying to mediate, but I'm not backing down. I still don't think it's a good idea to let him use my house for his business, and I'm starting to wonder if I was too harsh. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother use my house for his business? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her new house after she made a huge financial decision without consulting me. So I, 29M, have a younger sister, Emma, 26F. We've always had a pretty solid relationship, though we don't speak constantly. Growing up, I was often the one to look out for her. Our parents were pretty hands-off, so I was like a second dad to her when we were kids. As adults, we've kept a decent amount of contact, though we don't talk every day or even every week. More like every couple of weeks, just checking in. A couple of months ago, Emma told me she was planning to buy a house. We've always talked about buying homes in the future, but I never expected her to do it so quickly. She has been in a long-term relationship with her boyfriend, Mike, 27M, for about 3 years. Emma had always been a little impulsive, especially when it came to major decisions. So hearing this news didn't surprise me that much. What did surprise me, however, was how she went about it. I found out she had already put an offer on a house and was in the process of getting approved for a mortgage without ever discussing it with me beforehand. I felt blindsided because I was one of the few people she typically relied on for advice. I know she and Mike were looking at homes, but she never asked for my input, and I hadn't realized things were this far along. She told me she had already found the perfect house and was planning to move in by the end of the year. When I expressed concern about how quickly she was moving forward, especially without proper financial planning, she got defensive. I know it's not my business, but I also know how much debt she has from student loans, credit cards, and some recent bad financial decisions. She and Mike also have very different income levels, with him earning less than half of what she makes. I tried to explain that I wasn't sure she was ready for such a big financial commitment, especially when she hadn't fully gotten her debt under control. She brushed me off and insisted she and Mike had everything under control. Then, a week later, she dropped a bombshell. She asked me if I could help her with the down payment for the house. Now, I've always tried to be supportive of my sister, but this request really threw me off. The down payment for the house was a significant amount of money, and while I do okay financially, I don't exactly have a ton of extra cash lying around for something like that. I've got my own student loans, rent, and bills to manage, so I wasn't in a position to be handing over tens of thousands of dollars. When I told her I couldn't afford to help her in the way she was asking, she was disappointed, but I tried to explain my reasoning. I told her that I wanted to help, but I didn't think it was a smart decision for me financially, and I wasn't confident in her ability to handle such a big responsibility without better planning. I told her I would be more than happy to help her in other ways, like offering advice or researching mortgage options, but that I couldn't give her money for the down payment. She was upset, and the conversation ended kind of awkwardly. After that, she stopped reaching out to me as frequently. We hadn't had a serious argument in years, so this felt like a huge shift. For a few weeks, things were tense, but eventually, she came back to me with a new request. This time, she asked if I could co-sign the mortgage for her. She said she needed a co-signer to get approved because she didn't have a high enough credit score to qualify on her own. I was shocked. The idea of co-signing a mortgage for a house she was buying with Mike, who had less than stellar finances himself, felt like a terrible decision. It wasn't just her credit I'd be vouching for, but her boyfriend's too, and I wasn't comfortable with that. I know Mike, and while he's a nice guy, he's bad with money and doesn't take it seriously. I told her I couldn't co-sign because of the risks involved. If they fell behind on payments or ran into financial issues, I would be on the hook for the entire mortgage. She didn't understand why I was saying no and got upset, saying I was unsupportive and didn't trust her. That's when the real argument started. She accused me of treating her like a child, of trying to control her life, and of being overly cautious. She even said that it wasn't fair that I had the money to help, but wouldn't just give her a little bit to make it work. I ended up telling her that I wasn't going to jeopardize my own financial stability for something I thought was a risky decision. I also told her I didn't think I could be a part of this if she wasn't being responsible about it. I wasn't trying to be harsh, but I really believe this was a bad idea. It felt like she was rushing into a major commitment that she wasn't prepared for, and I didn't want to be involved in any way. She's barely spoken to me since that conversation. We had one brief exchange after she moved into the house, but it was pretty cold. She told me she'd gotten the house with Mike and that they were doing fine, but it was clear she wasn't happy with how things had gone down between us. Now, I'm feeling like maybe I made a huge mistake. I know she's upset with me, but at the same time, I don't want to be involved in something I think is irresponsible. I want her to succeed, but I also don't want to bail her out of a bad situation. I've always tried to help her when she needed it, but this time it feels different. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her house, especially after she made such a big financial decision without consulting me first. AITA for choosing to leave my friend's wedding early after she disinvited my boyfriend. I, 29F, have a best friend, Jen, 30F, who I've known since high school. We've always been super close, and I've supported her through a lot of big events in her life, including her engagement to her fiancé Luke, 33M. Jen and I have been through a lot together, and I've always considered her like family. We've shared everything from late-night talks about boys to bigger life milestones. So when she announced her wedding plans, I was ecstatic for her. Now, Jen's wedding is coming up in a few weeks. She'd been really specific about her guest list, and it seemed like there was a lot of stress around it, but I didn't think much of it at first. I was excited, I bought my dress, and I was planning everything around the big day. Then about a month before the wedding, there was a bombshell. Jen texted me one evening, asking if I could come over to talk. When I showed up, she told me that she and Luke had had a conversation and decided that my boyfriend, Kyle, 32M, wasn't welcome to the wedding. Kyle and I have been together for almost 3 years, and he's always gotten along with Jen, so I was really confused. Jen explained that Luke didn't feel comfortable with the idea of Kyle coming, mostly because he'd heard rumors about Kyle's past. Specifically, Luke had heard from a mutual acquaintance that Kyle had been involved in some kind of drama at a work event a couple of years ago that had made a few people uncomfortable. Jen clarified that she wasn't entirely sure about the situation, but felt like it was best to just avoid any potential tension at the wedding. I was shocked. Kyle and I have always been open about our past with each other, and I knew there was no truth to whatever rumor had been circulating. But even if there had been, I didn't think it should matter, especially since this was the first time Jen had ever brought up any concerns about him. I immediately started to feel uncomfortable and upset, but Jen seemed insistent that this was the only solution. She told me that she didn't want me to feel torn, but if I chose to bring Kyle to the wedding, she would have to remove me from the guest list. She said it wasn't just about my boyfriend, but about the overall atmosphere she wanted to create for the event. I tried to explain how important this day was to me as her best friend, and how much I wanted to celebrate with her and Luke, but I also wasn't comfortable just leaving Kyle out of something that was so important to me. Jen wasn't budging, and I left her house feeling incredibly frustrated, confused, and hurt. I talked to Kyle about the situation, and he was just as baffled as I was. He said he didn't care whether he went to the wedding or not, but the idea that Jen could disinvite him based on something as flimsy as a rumor really upset him. I also spoke to a few of my other friends to get their take on it, and they mostly sided with me, saying that I should stand my ground. Still, there's this lingering thought in the back of my mind. Should I just attend without Kyle and try to not let the whole situation get in the way of my friendship with Jen? A few days later, I got a message from Jen reiterating her decision. She told me she'd spoken to Luke again, and that they both agreed it would be better if Kyle wasn't there. She also mentioned that Luke had a few friends who were not particularly fond of Kyle, and they didn't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable at the wedding. I understood that weddings can be stressful and that people sometimes make weird decisions based on the pressure of organizing such a big event, but I felt like this was just going too far. I decided to respond with a text saying that, while I respected her decision, I didn't feel right attending without Kyle. I made it clear that I wasn't trying to be difficult, but I felt like if she couldn't trust me to bring my boyfriend, it was a reflection of the kind of friendship we had. I also said I didn't want to cause any drama, but I couldn't pretend to be okay with this. Jen didn't reply immediately, but the next day, she sent me a long message saying that she understood my feelings but still stood by her decision. She told me that she felt like I was putting my relationship with Kyle over our friendship, and that I was making her wedding day more stressful than it needed to be. She said that if I couldn't be happy for her and support her decision, then maybe it was best if we took some time apart. That message hit me hard. I felt like I had always been there for Jen, and now she was basically saying that she couldn't trust me to make a reasonable decision when it came to her wedding. I felt completely torn. I loved Jen, but at the same time, I didn't want to be in a situation where I had to choose between my boyfriend and my best friend, especially over something that seemed so petty. A few days later, the wedding day came, and I still hadn't spoken to Jen. I was heartbroken, but I made the decision to leave town for the weekend to avoid seeing her or the wedding go down without me. I knew I couldn't attend, knowing that it would be so awkward and uncomfortable. The next few weeks after the wedding were tense. Jen and I exchanged a few short texts, but the warmth that had once existed between us seemed to be gone. I tried reaching out a couple of times, but Jen didn't seem interested in reconnecting, and every time I tried to bring up the situation, she would shut me down. It felt like she was punishing me for standing up for my relationship, and I couldn't get past the feeling that she wasn't being fair. Now, I feel like I've lost my best friend over something that, in my opinion, wasn't a big deal. Kyle and I are still together, and things have been fine between us, but I can't shake the feeling that I made the wrong choice. I keep wondering if I should have just gone to the wedding without Kyle and try to make it work for the sake of our friendship, even if I felt hurt by Jen's decision. So, AITA for choosing to leave my friend's wedding early and not attending at all after she disinvited my boyfriend. AITA for cutting off my family after they accused me of being selfish for pursuing my dream job. I, 28F, come from a close-knit family. There's my mom, dad, older brother, 31, and younger sister, 23. Growing up, we were always supportive of each other, but things started to shift when I graduated from college a few years ago. Ever since I was a kid, I've always had one goal in mind: to become a wildlife biologist. I know it sounds like a cliché childhood dream, but I was genuinely obsessed with animals and nature. I spent my whole life reading about different species, watching documentaries, and visiting national parks. So when I got the opportunity to study environmental science in college, I jumped at the chance. After 4 years of hard work, I graduated and immediately started looking for a job in my field. The problem is, wildlife biology is not an easy field to get into. Most positions require you to be willing to relocate, and sometimes even work in remote or isolated areas, which isn't easy for someone who values their family time. But I was determined to make it work. I wasn't willing to settle for anything less than my dream job. So when I was offered a position with a respected environmental organization doing field work in a national forest in a rural part of the country, I was thrilled. The job would require me to move to a small town, which was a huge change for me, but it was a perfect opportunity to gain the experience I needed. I informed my family right away. I thought they'd be excited for me, but I was wrong. My mom, especially, was really upset. She told me I was being selfish for moving so far away and leaving them behind. She said that it was irresponsible to take a job that would isolate me in such a remote location, and that I was putting my career ahead of my relationships with them. I tried explaining that this was the opportunity one had been working towards for years, and that I needed this experience to build my career, but she didn't seem to understand. My dad and brother were a bit more neutral. They didn't exactly support the move, but they also didn't try to stop me. However, my younger sister took my mom's side. She said I was abandoning the family and that I was being selfish for not thinking about how my absence would affect them. It was painful to hear that from her, especially since we had always been close and I had always supported her decisions in life. It felt like they were all ganging up on me, which only made me more determined to prove them wrong. I moved to the small town, and although it was a huge adjustment, I found that I loved the work. The scenery was breathtaking, and I was learning so much. I was also making great connections with colleagues, and even starting to build a small community in the area. I kept in touch with my family as much as I could, but every conversation felt strained. They would keep asking when I was coming home for a visit, and each time, it was like they didn't understand how busy I was with my job. The reality of working in the field meant that I couldn't just take time off whenever I wanted. Things really took a turn when my family invited me to a big family reunion back home. It was going to be the first big gathering in years, and my mom made it clear that it would mean a lot to her if I came. I really wanted to go, but at that point, I was deep into a project that required my full attention. I told them that I couldn't make it, but that I'd visit as soon as I had a break in my schedule. That wasn't good enough. My mom called me crying, accusing me of being selfish again. She said that no job was worth missing family events and that I was growing apart from them. My sister echoed her feelings, saying I was making excuses and that I needed to prioritize family over everything else. At this point, I was really hurt. I've been working hard to build my career, and all I wanted was for my family to be proud of me. Instead, they made me feel guilty for pursuing my dream. I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning them, but that I couldn't just drop everything because they were upset. I told them that my career was important to me and that I needed to follow through with it. But that didn't seem to help. They kept insisting that I was wrong. After the reunion, things started to get even worse. My mom started calling less, and my dad and brother stopped reaching out as frequently. My sister began making passive-aggressive comments about me, choosing work over family, and it felt like the emotional distance was growing wider and wider. I started to feel like I was being punished for making a decision that was right for me. I understood they were disappointed, but it felt like they couldn't accept that my life choices were mine to make. Finally, I made the decision to take a step back. I told my family that I needed some time to think and that I would be limiting my communication with them for a while. I was exhausted by the guilt trips and constant criticism. I told them that I wasn't going to apologize for following my dreams and that I didn't want to keep engaging in conversations that made me feel like I was doing something wrong. They didn't take it well, and my mom especially was furious. She said I was being dramatic and that I was overreacting. But honestly, I just couldn't take it anymore. Now, I've been living in this small town for about a year, and I'm loving my job, but the silence from my family is deafening. I've barely heard from them since I made that decision. I've reached out a few times to see if things could be better between us, but every time I try, they make me feel guilty again, as if I'm the one who's causing the divide. I'm wondering if I did the right thing. I know I should be there for my family, but at what point do I have to prioritize my own happiness and future? AITA for cutting off my family after they accused me of being selfish for pursuing my dream job. AITA for refusing to let my cousin's boyfriend move in with me. Even though my cousin is in a tough spot, I, 29F, have always been very close with my cousin, Sarah, 28F. We grew up together, spending summers at our grandparents' house and having sleepovers almost every weekend. We've always been more like sisters than cousins, and I've been there for her through some pretty tough times in her life. Over the years, I've watched Sarah struggle with various challenges, but she's always managed to pull through, even if it meant making some tough decisions. Recently, Sarah's life has taken another difficult turn. She's been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Mark, 30M, for about 2 years now. At first, I wasn't sure about him, but over time I saw that he seemed to genuinely care for her, and he seemed like a good guy. They've had some ups and downs like any couple, but I always thought they were solid. But then everything started falling apart. A few months ago, Sarah called me in tears, saying that she and Mark were having serious financial problems. Mark had lost his job, and despite looking for a new one for months, he couldn't find anything. They were falling behind on rent, their car was about to be repossessed, and they had maxed out their credit cards just trying to keep things together. Sarah, who works as a nurse, was trying to pick up extra shifts, but it still wasn't enough. I understood that she was in a tough spot, and I immediately offered to help however I could. A few weeks later, I got another call from Sarah, but this time it was a little different. She explained that she and Mark had been talking about their options, and they were considering having a move in with me temporarily until they got back on their feet. She told me that Mark was too proud to ask for help directly, but he didn't want to be a burden to her either. She insisted that it would only be temporary, a few months at most, and that it would give them both a chance to save money and get back on track. Now, I'll admit, I was taken aback by this request. I've always been open to helping Sarah, but living with me? That was a different story. I've lived alone in my apartment for the past 5 years, and I've really enjoyed my space and independence. I'm a fairly private person, and the thought of having someone, let alone a stranger, since I barely knew Mark beyond a few family gatherings, move in with me made me feel really uncomfortable. I told Sarah I would need some time to think about it, but deep down, I was already leaning towards saying no. A few days later, Sarah called me again, this time a little more forceful. She said that she understood my reservations, but that they were in a dire situation. She told me that they were about to be evicted, and she didn't know where else to turn. She begged me to help, saying she knew it was a lot to ask, but that it would really make a difference for them. She even mentioned that they would both respect my space and be very quiet and tidy, and that Mark would find a job as soon as possible. It all sounded reasonable in theory, but the reality of having someone move into my home made me anxious. I tried to explain to Sarah that while I understood how tough things were for her, I wasn't sure I could handle the stress of having someone else living in my space. I told her that I valued my privacy and that I didn't want to risk damaging our relationship by agreeing to something that I wasn't comfortable with. I suggested that she and Mark look into renting a room in a shared house or trying to stay with other family members who might have more space. That didn't go over well. Sarah became upset, and I could hear her frustration in her voice. She accused me of not understanding how bad things had gotten and of being selfish. She reminded me that I had always said I would help her when she needed it, and now, when she was asking for the smallest favor, I was refusing. She said that I was being unfair and that I was prioritizing my own comfort over her well-being. I told her that wasn't the case, but she insisted that I was letting my own life get in the way of helping her, and she even mentioned that I had no idea how hard it was for her to ask for help in the first place. This whole conversation left me feeling guilty, but I still couldn't shake my gut feeling that it wasn't the right decision. I value my space, and I knew that having a stranger living in my apartment, even temporarily, would make me feel claustrophobic. I tried to reason with Sarah, saying that I didn't want to hurt her, but that it just wasn't something I was comfortable with. I told her that I would help in other ways, maybe help them find a better solution or contribute financially if I could, but I couldn't offer them a place to stay. Over the next few days, things between Sarah and me grew tense. She stopped answering my texts and calls as frequently, and when we did speak, she was short and distant. It was clear that she was hurt by my refusal, and I could tell that it was affecting our relationship. I started to feel like the bad guy, but at the same time, I didn't feel like I was in the wrong for setting boundaries in my own home. A week later, Sarah reached out again, this time saying that she and Mark had found a different option. They were going to try staying with one of Mark's old friends for a while, but she told me that she was disappointed that I hadn't been willing to help when she needed me the most. She said she couldn't understand why I was so unwilling to be there for her, especially when I had always been there in the past. I still feel torn about the whole situation. I love Sarah and I want to be there for her, but I also feel like I have the right to say no when it comes to my own home. I've been very clear that I'm willing to help in other ways, but she's made it seem like that's not enough. I'm beginning to wonder if I was too harsh or if I was right to set that boundary. I don't want to lose my relationship with Sarah over this, but I also don't want to sacrifice my comfort and peace of mind. So, AITA for refusing to let my cousin's boyfriend move in with me, even though I know she's in a tough spot. AITA for telling my sister I won't attend her baby shower after she refused to invite my son. I, 34F, have a 7-year-old son, Mason. My sister, Rachel, 32F, is expecting her first child, a baby girl, and she recently announced that she's hosting a baby shower. The event is coming up in a couple of weeks, and she's been planning it for months. Naturally, I was excited for her, and I've been helping out with some ideas for decorations and activities. We've always been pretty close, despite the occasional disagreements over the years, so I was looking forward to celebrating her new chapter in life. However, things started to take a weird turn when Rachel sent out the official invitations last week. I was looking through the guest list and immediately noticed something odd. My son, Mason, wasn't on it. Now, I understand that baby showers are typically adults-only affairs, but Rachel has always been really close to Mason, and she's always been very involved in his life. So, I was surprised and honestly a bit hurt that she didn't even mention it to me beforehand. I texted her asking if there was a mistake or if she just forgot to include Mason's name. But she quickly responded and explained that she didn't want kids at the shower. I told her I understood that, but given the close relationship Mason has with her, I wasn't sure how I felt about the whole thing. Rachel went on to explain that she and her fiancé, David, 35M, had made the decision to keep the event strictly for adults, and that there wouldn't be enough space to accommodate all of the children of the invited guests. She also mentioned that they wanted the baby shower to be a relaxing event and didn't want any chaos with the kids running around. I didn't think this was unreasonable, but I also felt hurt because Rachel has always been super involved in Mason's life, and he's always been welcome at family events. I reminded her of this and how they used to spend so much time together, and I said that Mason really looks up to her. She responded by saying that it wasn't about Mason personally, but more about the overall vibe of the event. She mentioned that there would be other friends of hers who had young children, and it just felt like too many kids for one day. I could see where she was coming from, and I didn't want to push too hard, so I asked if there was any way she would consider making an exception for Mason. I told her that I would be happy to make sure he was well-behaved and that it wouldn't be any extra hassle for her. Rachel seemed uncomfortable with this request and told me that she really wanted to stick to her guest list as it was. She emphasized that Mason would be more than welcome to come to the other celebrations, like the family barbecue they were planning after the baby was born. She said the baby shower was simply an adult-only gathering, and she didn't want to make any exceptions. This was where I started to get frustrated. I felt like Rachel was being unfair. If Mason were any other child, I might have understood, but she had always been so involved in his life. He's not a stranger, and it wasn't like I was asking her to invite a random kid. She knew Mason well and had spent a lot of time with him over the years. I felt like she was putting her own comfort above the feelings of her family, especially when it came to her relationship with my son. After a day or two of thinking, I sent Rachel a message saying that I wouldn't be able to attend the baby's shower if Mason wasn't invited. I told her I understood her desire to keep it an adults-only event, but I felt that if she was truly close to Mason, it would mean a lot to him to be there. I also told her that I would respect her decision if she stood firm, but I didn't think I could attend an event that excluded him, especially when it was a celebration for a new baby in the family. I explained that it would feel too much like I was choosing between her and my son, and I didn't want to put myself in that position. Rachel immediately called me, and the conversation did not go well. She was upset and hurt, telling me that I was overreacting. She said that I was making her baby shower about me, and that she didn't want to be put in the position of having to choose between me and Mason. She also mentioned that it wasn't like I wouldn't be involved in other ways, like helping her with the nursery or being there for the birth, so she didn't understand why I was making this such a big deal. At this point, I felt like I was getting defensive. I reminded her that I wasn't asking for a huge favor. I wasn't asking her to invite every child, just Mason. I also pointed out that she had a history of including him in her life, and it didn't seem right to exclude him now, especially since she had always made an effort to be involved with him. Rachel insisted that I was being unreasonable and that my response was putting unnecessary pressure on her when she was already stressed out about the wedding and the baby. I told her that I respected her decision, but I couldn't attend the baby shower under these circumstances. I felt that, as her sister, my son should be a part of the celebration, and her refusal to include him made me feel like I was being left out. Rachel then said, "Fine, if that's how you feel, then maybe it's better if you don't come." I hung up feeling devastated. Rachel and I have always been close, and now it felt like she was choosing the convenience of her baby shower over the relationship we've shared for years. I'm still hurt and upset that she didn't seem to understand where I was coming from, and the situation has left a serious strain on our relationship. Now, I'm wondering if I was too hard on Rachel or if I'm right to feel that my son should have been included. I don't know what to do next. I feel like I've already made my stance clear, but I'm not sure if I overreacted. I've always been there for Rachel, and I expected the same from her when it came to my child. So, AITA for telling my sister I won't attend her baby shower if my son isn't invited. AITA for telling my friend I don't want to be her bridesmaid after she made a huge change to her wedding plans. I, 30F, had a friend, Sarah, 29F, who I've known for over 10 years. We've been through a lot together, and I've always considered her to be one of my closest friends. She's like a sister to me, and we've always had a deep bond. I've supported her through countless things, from her bad breakups to her career changes, and I always thought our friendship was solid. About a year ago, Sarah got engaged to her fiancé, Mark, 32M, and naturally, I was over the moon for her. She asked me to be one of her bridesmaids, which I was honored to accept. I was so excited to be part of such an important moment in her life, and I couldn't wait to help her plan the wedding. We've talked about her wedding dreams for years, and I thought I had a pretty good idea of what she wanted. At first, Sarah and Mark were planning a small, intimate wedding with only a few close friends and family. They didn't want anything extravagant, just a beautiful ceremony and a nice reception at a local venue. She wanted a casual vibe, and she made it clear that the whole event would be laid back and fun, something that reflected her personality. As the wedding planning went on, Sarah started changing things. At first, it was little stuff, a different color scheme, an updated guest list. But then, it took a much bigger turn. About 6 months ago, she told me she wanted to upgrade the wedding to something more elegant and memorable. She started talking about how her dream was to have a destination wedding, but she also wanted it to be a week-long event in a tropical location. This meant a larger guest list and, of course, more costs. She was excited about the idea, but I wasn't thrilled. I didn't think the destination wedding idea was a bad one, but the entire vibe of the wedding started to shift. It wasn't the small, intimate gathering we had originally discussed. It was turning into something huge and expensive. As a bridesmaid, I felt like I had to support whatever decision she made, even though I wasn't a fan of the direction the wedding was going in. But the real problem started when she revealed how much it would cost for me to attend. The wedding was going to be in a tropical resort, and she sent me the list of expenses for the trip, which included airfare, accommodation, meals, and miscellaneous fees. The total came out to about $3,500 per person. I was taken aback. I know destination weddings can be expensive, but this was way beyond what I had anticipated. I make a decent living, but I'm not in a position to spend that much money on a single event, especially since I have other financial responsibilities like rent, student loans, and saving for my future. I decided to talk to Sarah about it. I explained that I really wanted to be there for her on her big day, but there was no way I could afford to go. I even offered alternatives. If she was set on the destination wedding, I told her I'd be happy to attend in spirit, perhaps send her a heartfelt letter or a special gift, but I just couldn't justify spending that kind of money right now. She didn't take it well. She immediately became defensive, saying I was letting money get in the way of our friendship. She told me that this was the wedding of her dreams, and if I cared about her, I should be willing to make the financial sacrifice to be there for her. She said I was being selfish and that it wasn't just about the money. It was about showing her how much I supported her in her marriage. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not supporting her. It was about being realistic about my finances. I have to prioritize my well-being and future, and spending over $3,000 for a single event just wasn't feasible for me. But she wasn't hearing it. She said I was ruining everything, and that I was making her feel like a burden. I was crushed. She said she'd always been there for me, but now I was turning my back on her when it mattered most. A few days passed, and I thought about the situation. I really care about Sarah, and I don't want to lose our friendship over this, but I also felt like she was being unreasonable. She knew the cost would be high, but she didn't care. She also didn't seem to understand my point of view, that it wasn't just the money, but how the wedding had changed from what she originally wanted, and how her asking so much of me felt a bit too much. I felt like she was putting her wedding dreams above everything else, including our friendship. Then, things took another turn. A week ago, Sarah called me and told me that after some thinking, she decided she wanted to change the entire tone of the wedding again. Instead of a tropical location, she was now leaning toward a luxury venue in a major city, and it would be a black tie event with an even bigger guest list. The price tag would probably end up being closer to $5,000 or $6,000 per person, including travel, accommodation, and the events surrounding the wedding. At that point, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had been holding on, trying to find a way to make it work, but this was the final straw. I told Sarah that I could no longer be a bridesmaid. I explained that, at this point, her wedding had become something so extravagant and out of reach that I didn't feel comfortable being part of it. I also didn't feel like I could support her choices anymore, especially since I had already expressed my concerns about the cost and the changes she had made to the plans. I told her I would be happy to celebrate her marriage in another way, but I couldn't be involved in such an expensive, over-the-top event. Sarah was furious. She called me selfish again and said that I was just looking for an excuse to back out of being part of her big day. She accused me of not caring enough about her and her happiness, and said that if I wasn't willing to support her dreams, I didn't deserve to be in her life at all. She also told me that if I wasn't going to be there for her wedding, then we might as well not be friends anymore. Now, I'm feeling incredibly conflicted. I love Sarah, and I've always been there for her. But I also feel like she's asking too much of me and putting her own vision of the wedding ahead of our friendship. I've been supportive in the past, and I've tried to be understanding, but this feels like it's gone too far. So, AITA for telling Sarah I can't be her bridesmaid anymore and that I don't want to attend her wedding. AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her medical bills after she chose to quit her job. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Lily, 25F, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. She's impulsive, often makes decisions without thinking through the consequences, and has never really taken responsibility for her actions. I, on the other hand, am more of a planner and someone who takes my responsibility seriously. This has led to a lot of tension between us over the years, but we've managed to maintain a decent relationship for the most part. A few months ago, Lily went through a tough time at her job. She had been working as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm, and while the work was demanding, it wasn't terrible. She told me that she was feeling burnout and that she wasn't happy with her work environment. After a few weeks of talking about how unhappy she was, she made the decision to quit her job. She didn't have another one lined up, and when I asked her what her plan was, she just said she'd figure it out and would take a break for a while. I was worried for her, but I respected her decision. After all, it was her life, and if she wanted to take a break to reevaluate things, that was her choice. However, things didn't exactly go as planned. A month after quitting, she hadn't found another job, and she started to get anxious about her financial situation. She had always been bad with money, spending impulsively on things she didn't need. By the time she reached out to me for help, she was behind on rent and struggling to pay bills. I offered her some advice and told her to start looking for a new job, but I made it clear that I wasn't in a position to give her money because I had my own responsibilities. I have a mortgage, student loans, and I'm trying to save for the future, so I couldn't afford to take on anyone else's financial burden. Lily wasn't happy about this response and kept asking me to help her out, saying she didn't know where else to turn. A few weeks ago, she called me crying. She had just received a medical bill that was too high for her to pay on her own, and she was stressing out about how she would cover it. The bill was for an emergency room visit she had a couple of months ago when she had a panic attack. While I was sympathetic to the situation, I was frustrated that she hadn't taken any steps to get insurance or even plan for unexpected costs like this. The fact that she had quit her job without a safety net and was now struggling to pay for medical bills didn't sit well with me. She asked me if I could help her pay for the bill. The total came to about $2,500, which was a significant amount of money. I told her I wasn't in a position to just give her that kind of money, especially considering her past decisions. I suggested she set up a payment plan with the hospital or look into any financial assistance programs that might be available. She became upset, saying that she had no idea how she was going to pay it off and that she couldn't handle the stress anymore. At this point, I felt like her situation was largely the result of her own decisions. If she hadn't quit her job without a plan, and if she had been more responsible with her finances, she wouldn't be in this situation. I also reminded her that she needed to start taking responsibility for her choices and that I couldn't bail her out every time she got into trouble. I know that sounds harsh, but I don't think it's healthy for me to keep enabling her behavior by giving her money every time she faces a setback. Lily was furious. She accused me of being selfish and not caring about her well-being. She said that I was lucky to have my life together and that I was acting like I had never struggled. She also said that I was unsupportive and didn't understand how hard it was to be in her shoes. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to be unsupportive, but that I wanted her to learn how to handle things on her own instead of relying on me all the time. This led to a big argument, and we haven't really spoken much since then. My parents got involved after the fight. They called me and told me that I was being too hard on Lily and that I should just help her out because family is supposed to support each other. They said that she was going through a tough time and needed my help. I explained to them that I didn't think giving her money was the right solution and that I had tried to help in other ways, like giving her advice on budgeting and looking for a new job. My parents, however, seem to think that I'm being unreasonable, and now there's a lot of tension between us. I've been thinking a lot about this situation, and I still feel like I did the right thing. I don't want to enable Lily's irresponsible behavior, and I think it's important for her to learn how to handle things on her own. But I'm starting to wonder if I've been too harsh. Maybe I should have just helped her this one time, or maybe I should be more understanding of her struggles. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her medical bills after she chose to quit her job? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my parents move in with me after they sold their house and plan to retire. I, 31F, have always been close to my parents, but we've had our fair share of disagreements over the years. Recently, things have reached a breaking point, and I'm wondering if I made the right decision in refusing to let them move into my house after they sold theirs. A bit of context, my parents, both in their late 50s, decided a few months ago that they were going to sell their house and move into a smaller, more affordable place. They had been living in a large family home for the past 30 years, but after I moved out, they realized they didn't need all that space anymore. They began planning their retirement, wanting to downsize and move somewhere with less upkeep. I thought it sounded like a reasonable idea at first. They wanted to enjoy their retirement without the stress of maintaining a big house. However, things took an unexpected turn when they told me they were planning to sell their house and move in with me while they figured out where they wanted to settle down. They said it would only be temporary, maybe a few months at most. At the time, I thought they were just looking for a place to crash until they found a new home. But as the days went by, their plans started to feel more permanent. They mentioned they would be comfortable living with me long-term since they didn't want to deal with the hassle of looking for a new place. They kept saying things like, "You have so much space, and we'd love to be closer to you, and it'll be just for a little while." I could sense that this temporary situation was going to stretch out much longer than they let on. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not against helping my parents. I've always been there for them emotionally, and I've even supported them financially in the past when they needed help with car repairs, bills, and other emergencies. But my parents and I have very different lifestyles, and I've worked hard to create a space that reflects my independence. I live in a nice 3-bedroom house that I bought a few years ago, and it's my sanctuary. I enjoy having my own space, and I value my privacy. I worked long hours and sacrifice a lot to get to where I am, and the idea of having my parents live with me indefinitely started to feel like a huge violation of my boundaries. I tried to be diplomatic about it at first. I told them I was concerned that it might be uncomfortable for everyone to have them living under the same roof long term. I explained that I enjoy my privacy and have a busy life, and I wasn't sure how it would work for us to live together. They assured me that they would respect my space, but they also said that they would need to settle in and that they would need some time before finding a permanent place. I asked them to set a timeline for how long they planned to stay with me, but they couldn't give me a clear answer. They just kept saying, "It'll all work out, and we don't want to rush into anything." At this point, I started to feel uncomfortable. I spoke to my partner, 32M, who is supportive but also expressed his concerns about having my parents move in with us. He pointed out that this wasn't just a casual favor, but a major life change that would affect both of us. We're both introverts, and we value our quiet time. The idea of having my parents around all the time with their different routines and habits felt overwhelming. We also started discussing how this could affect our relationship, and I was worried that my parents' presence would create tension between us. Finally, after weeks of them pushing the idea, I made the difficult decision to tell them that I wasn't comfortable with them moving in. I explained that while I loved them, I wasn't in a position to have them live with me long term. I emphasized that I value my privacy and that the idea of having them around all the time was making me anxious. I also pointed out that I thought it was important for them to establish their own independence in retirement rather than relying on me. I offered to help them find a rental property or look into other housing options that would be a better fit for their needs. I assured them that I wasn't abandoning them, but that I needed to set healthy boundaries. My parents were shocked. They took it very hard, and my mom cried during the conversation. She said that they were disappointed in me and that they thought I would want to take care of them in their retirement. They reminded me of all the things they had done for me growing up, and they accused me of being selfish and ungrateful. My dad tried to downplay it, saying, "It's no big deal, we can figure something else out," but I could tell he was hurt too. They kept saying things like, "We just want to be closer to you, and we're getting older, and we need you more now." I felt guilty, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't compromise on my boundaries. Things have been tense since that conversation. My parents are still looking for a new place to live, but they haven't been very communicative with me. They don't reach out as much, and when they do, the conversation feels strained. I've tried to make amends, but they're still holding onto the hurt. My mom has even mentioned that she's disappointed that I don't want to help her in her old age, and it's making me feel conflicted. To make matters worse, some of our extended family members have gotten involved. My aunt called me last week and scolded me for not being more supportive of my parents. She said that I was being disrespectful and that it's my duty to help them in their time of need. Some of my cousins have also chimed in, telling me that I should have let my parents stay with me, especially since they're older and need more help. I've tried to explain my side, but it seems like nobody really understands where I'm coming from. So now I'm stuck in this weird situation. I still feel like I made the right decision, but the guilt is eating at me. I love my parents, but I also know that I need to take care of myself and maintain my boundaries. They have other options available, and they've been getting by without me for their entire lives. I just don't think I should have to give up my own space and comfort to make them happy. AITA for refusing to let my parents move in with me after they sold their house and plan to retire. AITA for refusing to help my cousin with her dream vacation after she demanded I cover her expenses. So, this is a bit of a complicated situation, and I honestly don't know if I'm being unreasonable here, but I'm starting to feel like I might be the bad guy in all of this. I, 28M, have a cousin, Rachel, 30F, who has always been kind of a free spirit. She's the type of person who doesn't always think things through, especially when it comes to money. I've known her my whole life, and while we've always gotten along, we've never been super close. We've always had a cordial relationship, mostly just seeing each other at family gatherings or occasional get-togethers. But recently, she reached out to me for help with something, and I'm really torn about how to handle it. A few months ago, Rachel started talking about wanting to take a big international vacation. She's been talking about it for years, and I know it's something she's really been dreaming of, so I wasn't surprised when she told me she had finally booked a trip. The thing is, she was planning to go on this vacation with her boyfriend, but she mentioned that she'd been struggling to cover the costs. The trip was to a tropical island in Southeast Asia, and it was going to be a big, expensive adventure. Rachel told me she had saved up some money, but it wasn't enough to cover everything: flights, accommodation, activities, food, all of it. She explained that she and her boyfriend had been working hard to save, but due to some unexpected financial challenges, they were falling short. I didn't think much of it at the time, and I assumed she would figure it out. Then, a few weeks ago, she called me, asking if I could help with a significant portion of the expenses. She said she had almost everything covered, but needed a little extra for things like last-minute flight upgrades and luxury excursions she had added to her itinerary. The total amount she asked for was around $3,000. Now, I've done well for myself financially, but I'm not swimming in money. I have savings, but I'm also trying to plan for my future and handle my own expenses. $3,000 isn't something I could just throw around, especially not for a vacation that wasn't even for a close family event. But Rachel kept pushing, saying that this was the trip of a lifetime and that she wouldn't be able to go unless she got the money from someone. She went on and on about how this was her dream vacation and that it would mean everything to her to go and experience it. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling her I wasn't in a position to lend that kind of money right now. I also pointed out that it seemed like a bit much to ask, especially given that she had made the choice to book such an expensive trip in the first place. But Rachel didn't take my response well. She accused me of not caring about her happiness and said that if I really loved her as family, I would support her and help her make her dream come true. She claimed that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and that she had always been there for me in the past, so it was only fair that I return the favor. I was taken aback by her response. I mean, I get it. It's her dream vacation, and I understand wanting to do something special, but I really don't think it's fair to expect someone to just cover the cost of your trip. I told her I couldn't afford to help in that way, and suggested she look into other options, like cutting back on certain activities or adjusting her plans to make it more affordable. She didn't seem to take my suggestions seriously. Instead, she doubled down and told me that I was being selfish and that it wasn't about money, it was about supporting her. She said I should be happy to help make her dream a reality, and if I didn't, I was basically letting her down. After the phone call, I felt frustrated and torn. I don't want to be the kind of person who says no to family when they ask for help, but this felt like an unreasonable request. I had my own financial priorities, and I wasn't sure I could justify spending that much money on something that wasn't even essential. Plus, I felt like Rachel was being a little irresponsible by planning such an expensive vacation without ensuring she could afford it. It was as if she assumed someone would always bail her out when things didn't go according to plan. A few days later, Rachel reached out again, but this time, she was even more persistent. She told me that if I didn't help her, she wouldn't be able to go on the trip, and it would be a huge disappointment for her. She started crying and said that if I truly cared about her, I would find a way to help, even if it meant making sacrifices. I started feeling incredibly guilty, but I still wasn't convinced that this was something I should do. Now, I'm in a really tough spot. I don't want to lose my relationship with Rachel, and I don't want to be seen as the bad guy in the family. But I also don't think it's right for her to expect me to cover such a significant amount of money for a vacation that isn't even necessary. I've tried to offer her advice on how to cut back on expenses and suggested other ways she could make the trip more affordable, but she refuses to compromise. She still insists that the only way for her to go is if I help her out. I'm at a crossroads. I don't want to seem unsupportive or stingy, but I also don't want to enable her to make reckless financial decisions. So, AITA for refusing to help my cousin pay for her dream vacation after she demanded I cover her expenses. AITA for not wanting to let my sister move into my house after she sold hers and didn't tell me. I, 31F, have a younger sister, Lily, 27F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. Growing up, we were close, but as we got older, our lives took different paths. I married young and settled down quickly, while Lily was always more independent and free-spirited. We've had our ups and downs over the years, but overall, we've remained a part of each other's lives, even if we're not as close as we once were. About a month ago, Lily sold her house without telling me first. She had been living in a small townhouse for a couple of years, and I knew she'd been having some financial issues due to a recent job change. She'd mentioned before that she was thinking about downsizing, but she never gave me any concrete details. So when I found out from a mutual friend that she had sold her place, I was a bit taken aback. I didn't get the chance to ask her directly about it because, shortly after the sale, she called me to tell me that she was between places and would need to stay with me for a while. I was initially shocked. We've never lived together as adults, and while I've always tried to be supportive, the idea of having her move in with me felt a bit overwhelming. I'm married to my husband, Mark, 33M, and we have a toddler, Eli, too, so our house is already full of activity. I don't have a huge home, and while I love my sister, I've always valued my space. I asked her why she didn't reach out to me sooner about her situation, especially since I'm someone she could rely on. Lily explained that she didn't want to burden me with her problems, and that she thought it would be better to figure things out on her own before asking for help. But after selling her house and realizing she didn't have a backup plan, she said she had no choice but to ask me to take her in. At first, I was hesitant but didn't want to say no outright. I suggested she find a short-term rental or stay with some of her other friends, but Lily insisted that she didn't have enough savings for that and needed a place to stay temporarily until she got back on her feet. She promised it would only be for a few weeks at most, just long enough to give her time to figure things out. I told her I needed to talk it over with Mark and think about it, because it would affect all of us, and I didn't want to make any hasty decisions. Mark and I discussed it, and he wasn't thrilled with the idea. He pointed out that adding another person to the house, especially one who wasn't accustomed to our routine, would be a major disruption. We've worked hard to maintain a certain level of privacy and peace in our home, and having an extra person, especially Lily, would change that dynamic. I agreed with him. While I love my sister, I wasn't sure how well we would all get along, especially with Eli in the mix. I also wasn't happy that Lily had sold her house without discussing it with me or giving me any real heads up. It felt like she was making a big decision without considering how it might affect me or my family. After some back and forth, I finally told Lily that I didn't feel comfortable with her moving in. I explained that, as much as I wanted to help, our house was already pretty full, and I wasn't sure it was the best environment for her right now. I suggested that she reach out to some of her friends or look into renting a room or a small apartment. I was genuinely sorry that she was going through a tough time, but I didn't feel that moving in together would be the solution. Lily was upset, but I thought she understood. I told her that if she needed emotional support, I'd be there for her, but I couldn't offer her a place to stay. What happened next really surprised me. Lily accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. She said that, as her sister, I should be the one person who would always have her back no matter what. She went as far as to say that I was choosing my husband and child over her, and that I didn't really care about her situation. She reminded me of all the times she had helped me in the past and pointed out that I was the one person she could count on. She also said that she felt like I was turning my back on her when she needed me the most. I was taken aback by her reaction because I thought I was being reasonable. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong by setting boundaries. The argument escalated, and it felt like no matter what I said, Lily wouldn't hear me. She continued to tell me how disappointed she was in me and that I was turning into someone else. She even mentioned that she was starting to regret selling her house, and she felt like she had nowhere to go. It felt like she was manipulating my emotions to make me feel guilty, but I stuck to my decision. I kept reminding her that I loved her and that I wanted to see her succeed, but that didn't mean I was willing to let her move in with us. After a few days of silence, Lily reached out to me again, saying that she had found a new apartment and was moving in the following week. She thanked me for helping her realize that she needed to make better choices and that she would work things out on her own. While I was relieved she had found a solution, I still felt uneasy about the way everything had played out. Lily didn't apologize for the things she said during our argument, and I wasn't sure how to move forward from here. I felt like the relationship between us had changed, and I was left wondering if I had made the wrong decision by standing my ground. I still don't know if I did the right thing. I love my sister, but I also feel like I need to prioritize my own family and our well-being. I don't want to be seen as someone who doesn't care, but I also need to protect the boundaries I've worked hard to establish. It's been hard for me to shake the feeling that Lily is holding a grudge, and I'm not sure how things will be between us moving forward. So, AITA for not wanting to let my sister move into my house after she sold hers and didn't tell me. AITA for not allowing my friend to move in with me after she lost her job and home. I, 32F, have always been someone who values independence and peace of mind. I like my routines, my space, and my home is my sanctuary. I've always been open to helping people when they need it, but I also know my limits when it comes to what I can give emotionally, financially, or in terms of space. This situation has really tested my boundaries, and I'm not sure if I handled it the right way. So I'm reaching out to get some perspective. My best friend, Jessica, 30F, and I have known each other since college. We met through mutual friends, and since then, we've been inseparable. We've supported each other through breakups, career changes, and even family drama. Jessica and I are very close, and I've always considered her one of the most important people in my life. That said, we're also very different in terms of how we approach life. I'm a planner, while Jessica tends to be more spontaneous and carefree. This has never really been an issue in our friendship, but it has definitely led to some tensions, especially when it comes to responsibility. About a year ago, Jessica lost her job at a marketing firm. She was devastated, but I was hopeful that she would bounce back quickly. She had a lot of connections in the industry, and she's always been incredibly talented. But after months of looking for another position, things didn't work out. Jessica became more and more discouraged, and I could see her losing confidence in herself. She told me several times that she was struggling with the idea of starting over again, especially in a market that felt so bleak. I tried to be there for her as much as I could, offering emotional support and suggesting ways she could network, but it was clear she was overwhelmed. Things really started to take a turn when she told me that she was behind on rent and that her landlord was threatening to evict her. She'd already borrowed money from a few other friends and family members, but it wasn't enough to cover the cost. I felt for her, I really did. I knew she was struggling, but I also knew how much she hated asking for help. She had always been the type to handle things on her own, and I knew it wasn't easy for her to admit that she couldn't do it anymore. One evening, I got a text from Jessica asking if we could talk. When she came over to my place, she looked exhausted, and I could tell she had been crying. She told me that she was officially being evicted in 2 weeks and that she didn't know where else to go. She mentioned a few other options, but the reality was that none of them were ideal. Her parents live across the country, and they've never been very supportive, especially when it comes to her career choices. She didn't want to stay with any of her other friends because she didn't want to burden them, and frankly, I think she was embarrassed to keep asking for help. At that point, she asked me if she could move in with me for a while until she got back on her feet. I was taken aback. I knew things were tough for her, but I wasn't prepared for this. I've lived alone for several years, and while I love my friends, I'm very protective of my space. The thought of someone living in my home for an indefinite amount of time made me feel anxious. I've worked hard to create a space where I feel at peace, and I've always enjoyed the solitude that comes with living alone. I knew this wasn't a small request, and I had to really think about how I felt before responding. I took a few days to think about it. I wanted to be a good friend, and I wanted to help Jessica, but I was also worried about how this might affect our relationship. I knew that having someone live with me could lead to tension, especially since Jessica had a more laid-back approach to things, and I'm the complete opposite. I'm a stickler for cleanliness, organization, and quiet time, and I wasn't sure if Jessica's lifestyle would align with mine. After thinking it over, I decided to have an honest conversation with Jessica. I told her that I loved her and wanted to support her, but I didn't feel comfortable having her move in with me. I explained that I valued my personal space and that living together, even temporarily, might strain our friendship. I also mentioned that I didn't think I could handle the added stress of worrying about her situation on top of everything else in my life. I suggested that she look into renting a room or finding a temporary roommate situation or even staying with other friends, but I couldn't offer her a place in my home. Jessica was devastated. She started crying, saying that she didn't know where else to go and that she didn't have anyone else to turn to. She said she had always been there for me in the past, and that this was the time I should be there for her. She told me that I was being selfish and that I should be willing to make a sacrifice for her because she was in a tough spot. She accused me of not understanding what she was going through and of putting my own comfort above her needs. I felt horrible, but I also knew I had made the right decision for myself. I explained again that it wasn't about not wanting to help her, but about needing to set boundaries for my own well-being. I assured her that I would continue to support her in other ways, emotionally, helping her look for housing or contributing financially if I could, but that I couldn't offer her a place to stay. She left my apartment that night, still upset, and we didn't talk for several days. Over the next few weeks, I tried to check in on Jessica. She found a temporary place to stay with another friend, but it wasn't ideal, and I could tell she was still angry with me. She'd snap at me whenever I tried to reach out, and we stopped hanging out as much. I started to feel like I'd lost my best friend, and the guilt weighed heavily on me. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore how much I valued my space and how much I needed to protect it. Eventually, Jessica reached out to me, and we had another long conversation. She admitted that she had been angry with me, but she also acknowledged that she understood my perspective a little more. She thanked me for offering support in other ways, and we started rebuilding our friendship, but things still feel different. I'm still wondering if I made the right call, or if I should have put my own discomfort aside to help her out more directly. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend move in with me after she lost her job and home. AITA for confronting my sister about her constant financial dependence on me. I, 31, have a sister, Emily, 28F, who has always been a little, shall we say, irresponsible when it comes to money. Growing up, our parents were pretty strict, and we were taught to manage our finances carefully. Emily, on the other hand, never really absorbed that lesson. While I've always been cautious with money, budgeting carefully, and saving for the future, Emily has had a tendency to live beyond her means. And as she's gotten older, it's only gotten worse. She's had several jobs over the years, but none of them have lasted long term. Some were her choice, others were due to her lack of focus or getting into conflicts with her coworkers. Despite her charm and ability to talk herself out of most situations, she doesn't seem to stay committed to anything. Over the past few years, I've noticed a pattern where she'll get a job, work for a few months, then quit for a variety of reasons, mostly because she doesn't like the work environment or something isn't exciting enough for her. When she quits, the first thing she does is come to me for financial help. It started small at first. Help with her rent when she missed a payment, a loan to cover her phone bill, things like that. I never minded helping her at first because I care about her and I know it's hard to make ends meet when you don't have a stable job. But over time, it's gotten out of hand. She started asking for money every few months, then it was every couple of weeks, and soon enough, it was constant. I've always been generous with my family, and I didn't want to say no to Emily. But the problem was, she never seemed to take responsibility for her financial situation. She'd tell me she was getting back on her feet and just needed a little help this time, and then a few weeks later, the cycle would start again. It started feeling less like a one-time loan and more like a permanent financial arrangement between us. When I tried to talk to her about getting a job that she could stick with or cutting back on her spending, she would brush it off, say she didn't have time to worry about that right now, or tell me that I didn't understand the pressure she was under. One day, I found out from our mom that Emily had racked up thousands of dollars in credit card debt. She hadn't told me about it, but our mom had found out when she was helping Emily set up a payment plan. I was furious. Not only had Emily failed to mention the debt, but she had also been coming to me for money during the exact same time, asking for help to cover emergency expenses. I felt betrayed and like I'd been enabling her bad behavior. I decided to confront her about it. When I called her up, I tried to stay calm, but I was definitely upset. I told her I knew about the debt and that I was concerned about the pattern I'd been seeing. I explained that I couldn't keep bailing her out every time she found herself in a tight spot. I told her that I loved her, but I had my own responsibilities and financial goals, and I couldn't keep enabling her to live irresponsibly. I also told her that I couldn't afford to keep giving her money, especially when I felt like she wasn't doing anything to improve her situation. She was quiet for a while, but then she started getting defensive. She told me that I was being too harsh and unsupportive. She said that I didn't know what it was like to be in her shoes and that I was being judgmental because I had a stable career. She said that I wasn't being a good brother and that if I truly cared about her, I would help her without making her feel bad about it. She accused me of not understanding the pressure she was under and that I was living in a bubble where everything was easy for me. This caught me off guard because I had always been there for her in the past, and I never made her feel like I was judging her. I tried to explain that I wasn't judging her, but that I was worried. I pointed out that she had been getting into more and more financial trouble, and it seemed like she wasn't making any effort to change. I said I was worried that if I kept helping her, it would just become a cycle of dependency, and it wasn't good for her in the long run. She didn't really respond to this, but she kept reiterating how much she needed my support and how alone she felt. After that conversation, things got tense between us. She stopped reaching out to me, and whenever we did talk, she would bring up how I wasn't there for her, how I didn't understand what she was going through. I began to feel like she was manipulating me, and I started to feel guilty. But at the same time, I was frustrated. I wasn't the one who had made these financial mistakes, and I didn't want to be dragged into the consequences of them anymore. She wasn't taking responsibility for her own actions, and it seemed like she just wanted me to clean up the mess. A few weeks later, I heard from Emily again. This time, she called to tell me that she had moved into a new apartment, but she still didn't have a steady job and couldn't afford all of her bills. She asked if I could just help out a little with her rent until she figured things out. I was really upset. I had just had a serious conversation with her about her financial situation, and here she was again, asking for more help without changing anything. I told her no, that I couldn't help her anymore. I told her that she needed to take responsibility for her life and stop relying on others to bail her out. She was furious. She accused me of abandoning her and told me that I was the only person who had ever really supported her. She said that I was throwing her away because she wasn't perfect. She even went as far as to say that I didn't care about her future and that I was selfish for not helping her. I was stunned. I hadn't expected her to react like that, and it hurt. I've always tried to support her, but at this point, it felt like she wasn't learning anything from the help I'd given her. She wasn't changing her behavior, and I felt like I was being taken advantage of. Since that conversation, things between us have been strained. I still love my sister, and I still care about her, but I'm starting to feel like I've done everything I can. I don't want to cut her off completely, but I also can't keep enabling her behavior. I've been debating whether I was too harsh, if I should have been more understanding, or if I should have just given her the money she asked for. It's been eating me up inside. So, AITA for confronting my sister about her financial dependence on me and refusing to help her anymore. AITA for not helping my brother pay for his car after he crashed it and then blame me for not being more supportive. I, 29F, have a younger brother, David, 25M, who has always been a bit reckless. Growing up, he would always push the limits, whether it was sneaking out of the house, breaking curfew, or doing things that would make my parents lose their minds. But despite all of this, I've always tried to be there for him, even when he made poor decisions. I'm very close with my family, and I've always wanted to help where I can, but my relationship with David has gotten more strained over the years, especially after he started getting into trouble as an adult. A few months ago, David got into a pretty bad car accident. He crashed his car while speeding and not paying attention to the road. Fortunately, no one else was involved, and he didn't get seriously injured, but his car was totaled. I found out about the accident when he called me in tears, saying he needed help. He was devastated because his insurance didn't cover the full cost of the damages, and he didn't have enough savings to pay for the repairs or a new car. I could hear the panic in his voice, and he kept telling me how much he was going to struggle if he didn't get a new car soon because he relied on it to get to work. Now, I have to say that I've always tried to help my family when they needed it, but I don't have a ton of extra money to throw around. I've worked hard to save for things that are important to me, and I don't like the idea of bailing anyone out of their mistakes unless it's an emergency. David had been in and out of financial trouble for years due to his careless spending habits and lack of responsibility, and this was just another example of him not taking care of his own issues. So, while I empathized with the situation, I wasn't ready to offer financial help immediately. I told David that I wasn't in a position to give him the money for a new car or to pay for his accident repairs. I reminded him that he needed to take responsibility for his actions, and that part of growing up was dealing with the consequences of his decisions. I explained that I couldn't just step in and fix everything for him. He seemed to understand at first, but he kept calling me every day, trying to convince me to help him out. He told me that he didn't know what else to do, that he couldn't afford a rental car, and that he was going to lose his job if he didn't have a car to get there. After a week of constant pressure, I caved and asked him what he needed specifically. He said that he needed about $3,000 to cover the remaining balance for a new car after his insurance payout. I was still hesitant, but I figured it was a decent amount of money, and I didn't want him to lose his job. So I offered him a loan, emphasis on loan, because I didn't want to just give him money without expecting it to be paid back. I made it clear that this wasn't a gift and that he would need to repay me within a year. He seemed to accept this offer, and we agreed on a repayment schedule. A few weeks passed, and David received his new car. He seemed grateful at first and promised to stick to the repayment plan. However, as time went on, I noticed that he wasn't being very communicative about the loan. I reached out to him multiple times to check in on a repayment, but he would make excuses about being too busy or not having enough money right now. This started to frustrate me because, after all, I had helped him out and I didn't feel like I was getting the respect I deserved. Then, about 2 months after the loan was given, David came to me again, saying that he had another financial emergency. This time, it was his rent. Apparently, he had fallen behind on his rent due to some unexpected expenses, and he needed me to help him out again. I was taken aback because, first of all, I had just given him a large amount of money for his car, and now he was asking for more. I asked him what had happened to his money, and he told me that his car payment was higher than expected, and he had overspent on some other things. It seemed like every time I turned around, there was a new issue, and I was starting to wonder if he was simply mismanaging his finances. I told him that I couldn't lend him any more money and that he needed to find a way to handle this situation on his own. I also reminded him that he still owed me money from the car loan, and it was starting to feel like I was just being used to bail him out of his financial mistakes. David didn't take this well. He started to get defensive and angry, accusing me of being unsupportive and selfish. He said that I was the only family member he could rely on and that I had the money to help him, so I should be stepping up. He said that if I truly cared about him, I wouldn't hesitate to help him out, and that my refusal to do so made me a terrible sister. His words hit me hard, and I began to feel guilty for not helping him, but I also knew deep down that I wasn't the one at fault here. David's inability to manage his finances was not my problem, and I wasn't going to continue enabling his behavior. I had already given him a significant amount of money and had been patient with him on the loan, but it wasn't fair for him to keep coming to me for help when he wasn't taking responsibility for his own choices. The situation came to a head when David posted a passive-aggressive message on social media, hinting at how I had abandoned him and how he was struggling to make it on his own while everyone else seemed to have it easy. He didn't mention me by name, but it was clear who he was talking about. This really upset me, especially because I had tried so hard to be there for him. I decided to confront him directly and told him that his behavior was hurtful and unfair. I told him that I wasn't going to continue helping him if he couldn't take responsibility for his own actions, and that if he wanted to repair our relationship, he needed to make some serious changes in how he handled his finances and his life. David didn't take kindly to this confrontation. He accused me of being cold-hearted and acting like I was better than him. He said that I was just too comfortable in my life to understand how hard things were for him. This, of course, made me even more frustrated, and we ended up having a big argument. We haven't spoken since, and our relationship is still strained. Now, I'm left wondering if I did the right thing. I don't want to be the kind of person who cuts family off, but I also feel like I've done enough for David. I'm exhausted by his constant need for financial help and his inability to take responsibility for his own life. So, AITA for not helping my brother pay for his car after he crashed it and then blame me for not being more supportive? AITA for refusing to let my friend move in with me after she lost her job and got kicked out of her apartment? I, 27M, have a close friend, Kate, 26F, who I've known for about 5 years. We've been through a lot together and have always had each other's backs. Over the years, I've helped her through some tough situations, and I always thought of her as someone who I could rely on, and vice versa. We don't live in the same city, but we keep in touch regularly, and I always try to support her whenever she needs it. Recently, Kate went through a rough patch. She lost her job about 6 months ago, and while she had been trying to find something new, she's struggled to get back on her feet. She's been living off her savings, and while I know she's been trying hard, she hasn't been able to make much headway with finding a stable job. About 2 weeks ago, she told me that she got a notice from her landlord that her lease wouldn't be renewed and that she had to move out. I wasn't entirely surprised since I knew she hadn't been able to keep up with her rent payments for a while, but I felt bad for her nonetheless. Kate was stressed out about the situation, and she told me that she didn't have anywhere else to go. Her family lives far away, and she doesn't have a lot of other friends who could help. She then asked if she could move in with me for a while. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond. I knew she was going through a tough time, and I wanted to be there for her. But I also knew that living together could complicate things. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment, and while I'm happy with my living situation, it's definitely not ideal for having someone else move in, especially for an extended period of time. We've never lived together before, and I'm not sure how well we would mesh as roommates. I also didn't want to jeopardize my own stability or comfort by taking on the responsibility of housing someone else, especially when I wasn't sure how long her situation would last. I asked Kate how long she would need to stay, and she said she wasn't sure, but it could be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months depending on how quickly she found a new job and a place to live. I told her I needed some time to think it over. The last thing I wanted to do was turn her down, but I also didn't want to put myself in a situation where I felt uncomfortable or overwhelmed. After thinking it over for a few days, I decided to call Kate and let her know that I couldn't let her move in. I explained that while I wanted to help, I didn't think it was a good idea given the limited space in my apartment and the potential strain it could put on our friendship. I also mentioned that I wasn't in a position to support her financially, especially since I didn't know how long she'd need to stay. Kate didn't take the news well. She started crying on the phone and said that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. She said that I was one of the only people she could rely on, and it hurt that I wouldn't let her stay with me. She accused me of being selfish and told me that I didn't care about her struggles. I felt terrible hearing her say that, but at the same time, I knew that I had made the best decision for my own well-being. After the phone call, I tried to reach out to her a few times to offer support in other ways. I told her that I could help her look for resources or potential places to stay and that I was still there for her emotionally. I also offered to help her find temporary solutions, like staying with a mutual friend or even looking into short-term rentals or co-living spaces that might be more affordable. But Kate wasn't receptive to these suggestions. She was still upset and told me that if I didn't help her in the way she wanted, then it didn't matter what other offers I made. She told me that I had let her down and that she couldn't trust me anymore. I was confused and hurt by her reaction. I get that she's going through a tough time, but I didn't think it was fair for her to expect me to put myself in an uncomfortable situation just to help her. I really do care about her, but I also have to set boundaries. I know it sounds harsh, but I think sometimes people forget that just because you're close friends, it doesn't mean you should sacrifice your own well-being for them. I have my own life, responsibilities, and space to consider, and I can't just put all of that aside every time someone asks for help. After that, Kate stopped responding to my texts and calls for a few days. When she finally reached out, it wasn't to apologize or talk things through. It was to let me know that she had found a temporary place to stay with a different friend. She also mentioned that she was planning to move in with this friend permanently if things didn't improve with her job situation. I was relieved that she found somewhere to stay, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like our friendship was taking a hit. The tension was still there, and I wasn't sure if things would ever go back to normal. I've been feeling really conflicted ever since. I know I made the right decision for my own well-being, but I also don't want to lose my friendship with Kate. I understand that she's struggling, but I also feel like she's not respecting my boundaries. She has other people in her life who could help her, but it feels like she expected me to drop everything to solve her problems. I don't know if I'm being too harsh or if she's being unreasonable in expecting so much from me. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend move in with me after she lost her job and got kicked out of her apartment. AITA for calling out my brother after he dismissed my career choice. I, 28F, have always been close to my family, especially my brother, Jason, 30M. We grew up together, played sports, and supported each other through the highs and lows of life. We've always had a bit of a sibling rivalry, but it was mostly good-natured, and we shared a lot of the same values. We were both the first in our family to graduate from college and both did well in our respective fields. I went into education, while Jason became a successful corporate lawyer. Recently, things started getting tense between us. Over the past year, I've been pursuing a career as a school teacher in a public high school. I love my job. I find it incredibly fulfilling and meaningful. I'm passionate about working with my students, mentoring them, and helping them build a better future. While it's not the highest paying job, I always knew it wouldn't be. I've never been interested in making a fortune. What matters to me is the impact I have on my students' lives. Jason, on the other hand, works long hours at a law firm, pulling in a six-figure salary and living in a large house with his wife and kids. He's always been very focused on money, status, and climbing the corporate ladder. I've never judged him for that, but I do get the sense that he looks down on my career. We've had discussions about it before, but they've always been more about him sharing his thoughts than really trying to understand my perspective. The tension between us reached a peak at a family gathering last month. It was just a casual dinner with our parents, my sister, and a few close family friends. We were all sitting around a table, having some drinks, and catching up. It was the usual stuff, talking about kids, jobs, vacations, and life in general. At one point, Jason started talking about how unfortunate it was that I had chosen to teach instead of doing something real with my life. He said that teaching was fine for people who can't hack it in the real world, and that it was a waste of talent. His exact words were something like, "You could be doing so much more, but instead, you're stuck in a classroom with kids who probably don't care." I was shocked. This was the first time he'd been so outright dismissive of my career. He had always made little comments here and there, like saying I was underpaid for what I do, or that teaching wasn't exactly prestigious, but this felt different. It felt personal. At first, I tried to keep my cool. I didn't want to make a scene, but it was getting harder to stay silent. I just felt this rush of anger, not because he didn't understand my choice, but because he was belittling something I was passionate about. I've worked hard to become a teacher, and I've seen the positive changes I've made in my students' lives, even if it's not something that gets a lot of recognition or praise. So I snapped. I said something like, I've always respected what you do, even if it's not something I'd choose for myself. But for you to sit there and act like my career doesn't matter because I'm not pulling in a ton of money or getting a fancy title is insulting. I work with kids who need guidance, and I make a difference in their lives every day. Maybe you should try focusing on more than just how much money you make and start looking at what actually matters. Jason got defensive, of course. He said, "It's not about the money. It's about doing something that's actually meaningful and impactful. People with your skills should be out there in a field that challenges them, not stuck with kids who are probably a lost cause anyway." That's when I really lost it. I said, "You have no idea what you're talking about. You think your high-paying job matters more because it comes with a nice paycheck? Your life may be comfortable, but it's empty. I don't need to be a millionaire to feel fulfilled. You're just too obsessed with status to see that." The room went quiet. Our parents were looking uncomfortable. My sister was visibly awkward, and even some of the family friends were trying to change the subject. Jason's face turned red, and he just said, "Well, I guess I shouldn't expect someone who chose a career in education to understand what it takes to actually succeed in the world." He left shortly after, saying he had to work the next day. Since then, I've been feeling conflicted. On one hand, I know I was right to stand up for myself. Jason's comments weren't just disrespectful, they were ignorant. On the other hand, I know he's hurt and I hate that. Jason has always been the golden child in our family, the one who was expected to be the successful one, and it feels like I've somehow made things worse between us. I've tried to reach out to him since the dinner, but he hasn't responded. I sent a text apologizing for the way I handled it, but I didn't apologize for my beliefs. I told him I understood that we have different values and that I respect his career, but that I wish he would respect mine too. He hasn't replied, and now I'm wondering if I overreacted. I've spoken to our parents, and they've both told me they understand why I was upset, but that maybe I should have handled it with a little more grace. My sister said that Jason's comments were out of line, but that I could have tried to have a calmer conversation instead of turning it into an argument. She's right. I probably could have been more diplomatic, but I also feel like I've let this stuff slide for too long, and it finally built up. Now I'm left wondering if I was wrong for calling him out the way I did, or if he just needed to hear the truth. I get that people have different views on success, but I don't think that gives anyone the right to belittle the choices of others. So, AITA for calling out my brother after he dismissed my career choice. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.